welcome to the Marina Skewer podcast. My name's Marina, I'm a knitwear designer and yarn dyer based in the southwest of England. And today I am going to be talking about a project that has been going on for a very long time, which is my West Country collection, which is published today and which I am wearing all of. I'm probably going to end up regretting that, but we're going to talk through things, and as I've talked about each one, I will probably remove it down to the last item. And we'll see if I get there before heat stress. So this collection is something I've been working on for ages and I'm really, really proud of it. It is a project that was partially funded by the Southwest of England Fibre Shed, which is an organisation I'm a member of, and it is an organisation that aims to encourage and strengthen regional textile systems so that we are working with natural fibres that are grown and sourced locally and using those in a way that betters people and planet and prioritises welfare and environmental regeneration. And so to that end, I wanted to create a collection that focuses more on the yarn than knitting patterns often tend to do, because I think a lot of knitters, even knitters who are choosing to use natural fibres, which I'm all for, often, if it's not a yarn that is claiming to be traceable or anything, it's often the wool is grown in one country, then shipped to another for scouring, and then shipped to another for spinning, and then sent off to a different continent for dyeing, and then probably posted across the sea. There are really complex supply chains, and I wanted this collection to be focusing on yarns where the supply chain is very simple and localized, and the yarn miles are very few. And so I've worked with 5 farms in the southwest of England, all of whom I've visited, and taken inspiration from those visits to design the items that are in the collection. So I'm going to go through them one by one and talk a little bit about the farm and what I have designed, and I really hope you're going to enjoy it. The collection is available as a PDF. At the moment, the whole collection is available as a single purchase, so all the patterns in one document, and then at some point in the future they'll be published individually, but that's not yet. And so I think I will start with probably the mitts, because I'm really keen on them, but my wrists are getting quite warm. Which is ideal because that's what they're designed for. So these mittens are the Flock Flight mitts, and the yarn I've used is Jacob and Portland from the Woven Briar. So Beck is over in West Somerset, and she has Portland, Shetland and Icelandic sheep, and the Jacob comes from a neighbouring flock across on Exmoor. So it's a flock of sheep that she works with and sources wool from. And they have a double cuff. So on the inside of the cuff, it's just the plain main colour ribbing, and then on the outside we've got corrugated ribbing. There's ribbing that can be folded back over the hand, or you can have it so that you can scrunch your fingers inside. I like to do that out on walks, but I also like to be able to use my hands when I'm out and about without having to take things off. Open thumbs for, again, hand usage, texting. And there's colour work, different patterns on the palms and the back of the hand. And so the inspiration for these ones was I visited Beck back in the summer, and we sat in her workshop for a while. She was preparing some of her naturally dyed yarn for weaving kits. She grows her own dye plants and uses that to dye her wool. And then she teaches spinning and makes little weaving kits for band weaving. So she was preparing those, and sort of ducks were waddling in and out of the workshop, and it was just lovely. And for ages we thought it was going to rain, and eventually we decided to go out and see the sheep. And as we did, it cleared up, and it was a lovely sort of warm, hazy afternoon. And as we sat in the field, we ended up just sitting on the ground while the sheep sort of huddled around us. And it's the only farm I've ever been to where the sheep immediately approached without having to be enticed by a food bucket, which I think is a testament to Beck and how much she loves her sheep. It's really nice. And as we sat there sort of chatting and the sheep wandering about, I was just struck by how many swallows there were around. It was incredible because the field is on quite a steep hillside in a very quiet valley, and all you could really hear was the occasional sheep and the buzzing of insects and the swallows chirruping about as they caught them. And it was kind of that idea of the flock of birds above and the flock of sheep on our level. I really enjoyed. And so I designed the mitts with a little colourwork pattern of kind of subtle little V's, which are inspired by the white underside of swallows as they fly. And then on the palm of the hand, it's just a plain alternating 1 by 1 colourwork pattern. And so yes, these are the 2 yarns I used. Jacob, I love Jacob as a yarn. It varies quite a lot in colour because Jacob sheep are very distinctive looking and generally white with lots of brown mottles. But underneath the fleece is darker. It looks brown because usually the outside of the fleece is bleached by the sun, and they have incredible horns of varying numbers. They're just very impressive looking sheep. And the wool they produce is lovely. It's not the softest, but it just always has a really nice feel to it. And I love the sort of fuzzy, warm grey it gives. And then the Portland is very different. It's really, really sleek. And where's my little swatch? So I've got little squares of stockinette, and I do these just to familiarise myself with the yarn and see how it knits up, and also what kind of gauge I'm getting. If I don't like how the fabric is feeling based on the needle size I'm using, I'll often either start another swatch or just unravel and begin again to get a fabric that I like. And then once I've got familiar with the qualities of the yarn, I will then decide what I want to do with it. So this one I couldn't resist using both yarns, and the fact that they contrast quite well, both in colour but also in texture, because the Portland is really crisp. I think it would be lush for cables. I'd really like to try some cables with it. I think I will at some point do some swatching with this for some cables, because I've been on a big cable kick recently. And then I've just got my tiny swatch, just testing out how the stitch pattern's going to flow into each other. I've got the little bit where the cuff folds over. It's just the mitten in tiny miniature, but I've got floats going across the back because swatching in the round, I leave the strands on the back rather than steeking or anything. And so these I've designed in 5 sizes. So the accessories in the collection go from child size to very large adult. The largest size of both the hat and the mitts they're on the upper extremes of the humans that are likely to need them. So I've made the middle size, so this is the size 3 out of 5 sizes. And you can make the cuff longer or shorter if you want to. You can make the ribbing section that gets folded back longer or shorter if you want to. And so that is those ones. These are the Flock Flight mitts, and the yarn is from the Woven Briar. And I will be including links to everything below, all of the yarns. And yeah. So next up is the hat. I am wearing the hat with the brim folded, which I realised on the photo shoot we did for the collection. I didn't get any photos with the brim folded, and I'm slightly annoyed at myself, but hey ho. So it is quite sort of gathered on the top. It's got a little bit of billowiness to it, and if I take it off and put it on again, this is how I usually like to wear it outside. The idea is that the hat is to protect you from an English winter, so it is intended to be very warm and insulative and protect you from the wind and rain and the cold. So you can pull it sort of right down, which stops the rain getting in your eyes, and also when we were doing the photo shoot it was really good for keeping the sun out of my eyes because it was quite a bright day and I don't cope well with getting the sun in my eyes. So the brim is herringbone stitch, which looks very different on both sides, but I think is really pretty on either one. So this is called Hedge and Wool. Sort myself out here a little bit. So we've just got a herringbone brim and nice little decreases there. I feel like the top looks like a bun, which I really enjoy. And so the interesting thing with this is that I designed it to be felted. So this is yarn from Lower Hampton Farm up in the Cotswolds, and it's just the most incredible place. And the day I visited was rather like today, very misty and dark. It was December, so it was about a year ago. And so we didn't have much daylight time to look around the farm. And at the same time, I drove up, and you go up sort of onto a plateau and then down into a dip, and the driveway winds around. And it was just like driving into a Disney film, even though there was mist and the trees were all bare. There were birds and squirrels sort of jumping across the drive as I went down, and it was just the prettiest thing. And Lydia there keeps Devon close wool sheep, which are a rare breed. And I was honestly expecting the yarn to feel honestly a bit not nice. I like quite a broad range of yarn, but given the descriptions I had heard of it, I was expecting it to be quite coarse and not great. You know, it's one of those things that's often described as being good for outerwear. But when I felt it, I really, really loved the yarn. And it's very bouncy. It's just, even in the skein, it's so pretty. It's this beautiful creamy white. The yarn is so round and it's really lofty. And I just wanted to keep to create something that was going to keep the outdoors out. And so the hat pattern comes with 2 sets of measurements and 2 sets of gauges, so that you can make it at the larger size and then felt down to the size you want to, or you can just knit it at the size you want it to be in a lighter yarn if you use like a 4-ply yarn and smaller needles and get the after felting gauge with that. So it's a reasonably simple pattern, just with that little bit of herringbone and a nice tubular cast on. But it's it's intended to be worn outside on slightly not great days. And it is called Hedge and Wool because this little border both recalls, like, there are lots of, between the fields at Lower Hampton Farm, they have a mixture of some fences, but lots of old Cotswold dry stone walls. And also they've done a lot of hedge regeneration work. So they've assessed the existing hedges on the farm. And I think over the last few years, they've been replanting areas that needed attention. Excuse me. And so replanting some areas with native hedge plants and ensuring that those are providing a really good habitat for wildlife on the farm. And so yeah. And within the collection I do talk a bit about what the farms are doing. A lot of them have quite interesting programs that they're involved in for both improving the soil but also biodiversity on their farms, and I love that. It's what makes them so interesting. So yes, hedge and wall hat, and then next we'll do the scarf. So this one's quite difficult to show off just because it's really dark yarn, but it's beautiful, and I think it's one of the most intriguing yarns I've used in this collection because it's a blend of some very different fibres, which is something I really enjoy. This is rum and raisin yarn from Raw Wool Company. So it is a blend of 70% Svartbliss and 30% Wensleydale. So Anton of the Raw Wool Company keeps a flock of coloured Wensleydale sheep, and they give a very long, lustrous, like really long fibre that's quite glossy, and it's a beautiful fibre. But then the Svartbliss, although it's still very dark, is a very different fibre. It's very, very crimpy and bouncy, and there's nothing sort of sleek about it at all. It's very squishy and it's quite matte. There isn't much shine to it. So the combination of those two yarns creates something is quite sort of insulative, but it's also got a crispness to it, but it's got drape, which is really nice. I quite like a scarf with good drape to it so that it stays put, like it's got a bit of weight to it. And it also has a bit of bounce just to keep things really nice and warm. And so the scarf is written for one size, but I've given instructions so that you can modify the width and length quite easily. And so it's got little points, just slanty ends like that, because I wanted quite a simple stitch pattern for this one. Because it's such a dark yarn, I wanted it to be textural rather than detailed, because something fiddly just wouldn't show up particularly well. And so it's in a broken rib that's just all about how the light hits it. And so it looks different on the right side and wrong side, but I think both sides are equally lovely. And we've got tubular bind off and cast on, and nice slipped selvages to keep it really neat. And so this one was inspired by visiting, we didn't go to see Anton's sheep because they were in fields a really far away from his house, and we didn't have time to go on the long drive to go and visit them, but we visited Sarah, the Kerno shepherdess, who keeps the Svartbliss that are in this yarn, and we went to see some of her sheep. And the first field we went to visit, I'd been driving down on a really nice hot afternoon, but as I was driving down to Cornwall, it was just getting hotter and sort of closer and more humid feeling, and it was really still. It was a bit weird, and I was worried that my car was going to overheat because yay, car troubles. And when I got there, just gradually the mist closed in, and so by the time we got out to the fields, it was quite sort of gloomy, and the fields usually have a beautiful view over the sea because they're up on the hillsides by the coast, and we couldn't see the sea. The view was gone, everything was just stark white. And in this field there were 2 pine trees there with big old pine cones on them, but that for some reason hadn't fallen, and so were covered in lichen. They must have been there for years and years. And you could see between the 2 trees there's a single small standing stone that was probably sort of a bit over waist height. And the sheep were all just gathered about this stone, just sort of lying there and grazing and things. And it was just really striking. And I think there was such an amazing atmosphere to just that scene. And then as we got closer to the sheep, they all galloped about because Svartblåsar, they're big sheep and they're just quite majestic looking. They're all black, but with a really strong white blaze down their noses. And yeah, so I called this one Lichen stone because the idea is that the slant on it reflects that slightly broken end of the standing stone. And the texture is kind of the slightly knobbly texture of the rock and the lichen growing on it. So this one you could modify a fair bit because you've got the slant sort of built in, and it's done with short rows, so you can do it across any number of stitches, and the instructions tell you how to keep going if you've modified the width. So you could go really, really wide and then do a very short section before starting the other point at the end. And instead of just having a rectangle with points on it, you could end up with a massive sort of parallelogram. So you could do a shawl. I really want to do that. And I also think it would be a really nice way to show off colour changes in handspun yarn. But this one, I'm going to be sad to give this to my husband because it's going to be his. It is too similar to my hair colour, and I already have a large dark brown shawl. This is almost black. It's lovely. But Ben could do with some things that are actually his rather than trying to scoop something suitable out of the knitwear basket that's in our hall. So this one is going to be his because I have designed the whole collection so that it is unisex. I specifically avoided pretty details. That sounds... I didn't want things that were too delicate. I wanted the designs to be practical and good for wearing outdoors because this collection is inspired by the outdoors and working outside and doing things outside, having to make use of your hands, having to make sure things aren't going to get in the way. And so yeah, so I wanted to do a scarf specifically that was going to be suitable for quite a wide range of people. And I do also have, I should have brought this out when I was talking about the Wensleydales, but we've got some locks here that show just how, if I extract one, you can see how long those are. And they have a very sort of ringlety crimp rather than being tightly squiggled. And there you can see, hopefully, how they get lighter on the tips, which is where the sun bleaches them. So this is the Wensleydale that makes up 30% of the rum and raisin yarn that went into the scarf there. And then I've got some Romney here. I didn't end up using the Romney, but this is in some of Raw Wool Company's other yarns, because Anton has yarns that are purely his own sheep, but then he also works with local shepherds, quite young people who he often keeps his sheep with, and they work together to sort of look after their animals. And then he uses those to create a palette of yarns that has a really nice range of natural colours and textures. So yeah, lichen stone scarf. I'm looking at the floor trying to find the next thing I need to talk about. I'm wearing them. So the next one is the Valley Roofs cardigan, which I love. I'm excited to be able to wear it more. I've been very precious about these things, making sure that I haven't worn them too much so that they would look nice for photography and showing to people until the collection is published. And now I can wear them a bit more because I have a toddler, I'm a bit spilly, the chances of me getting coffee on things are quite high. I wanted to wear the mittens the other day, but I was going out for mulled wine and I almost certainly would have got mulled wine on the nice shiny bits of Portland. Valley Roofs cardigan. So this one, the yarn is from Gullet Farm down in South Devon. It's a lovely place. I've been a couple of times now because it is literally a couple of miles away from my grandma's house, and it's just really nice to go down and visit Carolyn. And when we went a couple of months ago, I ended up taking my husband and my grandma and my little boy, and you know, just going and visiting the sheep, and it was really nice. And so they keep mostly Shetlands, and well, they've got a smallish number of Shetlands and Black Welsh Mountain sheep, and then a larger flock of Romneys. So the Romneys are all white, like the fleece I just showed you, and then the Shetlands are all... There's a broad range of colours that you get in Shetland sheep. There's quite a lot of variance, and it's one of the things I love about the breed. And so the way Gullet Farm produce their yarns is that they take an individual Shetland fleece and they blend it with some of the Romney, so they can create a larger batch from each Shetland fleece. But that means that the yarn is named for the Shetland and then it's got some of the Romney added. But each batch, therefore each colour, is informed by the natural colour of that individual sheep's fleece, which I love. I think it's a beautiful concept, because having a batch spun from a single fleece is often going to lead to quite a small batch, which can be impractical sometimes. And so we've got two colours in the cardigan. The main colour is from a sheep called Lichen. And then just around the edges, so if I show you, we've got on the pocket here, all around here, around the hem, and all the way round the shawl collar, we've got just a little edging of Infinity, which is a darker grey. And so this is a saddle shoulder. So you start off with the shoulder, with each shoulder, work a little bit of the cables, and then you pick up stitches for the body. And then once the body is finished, you do the sleeves. The sleeves have got a bit of a taper on them so that they're shaped nicely, but they are roomy up top and round the shoulders, because it is aimed to be a layering piece. It is intended that you have warm layers underneath, like a tank top or vest. And there's optional side shaping. So the shaping tapers the body slightly from here-ish, so probably the widest point of the chest, down to the hem. And it's just slight shaping, but it means that if you are someone who has either very broad shoulders or a large bust, but a comparatively small waist and hips, that shaping will work a bit better for you. I know that because, again, trying to make this be really good for lots of bodies, My husband has broad shoulders and a long body, and when I make things for his shoulder width, they end up being very, very wide at the bottom because of him being an inverted triangle. He is cronk-shaped. And so yes, that shaping is optional, so if you tend to be fairly even in width all the way down, then you can omit it, and stitch counts are given for both. And there are lots. I've talked about this cardigan quite a lot because I finished it a while ago. So yes, when you're picking a size, it's quite important that you check both the crossback measurement and the chest measurement and the hip measurement, and pick your size and whether you want to include the side shaping based on those. And yeah, because yeah, there are some increases at the underarm, so it's not a proper drop shoulder shape, so that it gets a bit wider there. And trying to think of other things to say. I probably mentioned that it has pockets, but I think the fact that it has pockets is really important. If I just get a phone a second, because that's my measure of a good pocket. It doesn't go all the way in, but it's not going to fall out. And so the cable pattern from the sleeves is repeated on the pocket there. The cable pattern is sort of the thing that started off the design. So if I get my swatches again here, we've got plain stockinette in the darker yarn. So that's the one I ended up using just for the edgings. And a tiny little pocket test. Can get 2 fingers in there. How did I do that completely invisibly? That's impressive. Little pocket test. I was originally going to do the lighter colour as the edging, but I find that as edges usually get the most wear, they're the area that's most likely to show, I don't know, I feel like a darker yarn feels more appropriate there. And also I wanted the lighter colour to show off the cable pattern better. And so I started, this was the first iteration of the cable pattern. And you can see it doesn't show up as well. And I made some minor alterations to just the background of the stitches and the spacing to ensure that the motif would show up nicely. And so second iteration, and there we've got it going into the ribbing and the contrast edging. So this came from the fact that the house and buildings at Gullet Farm are down in a very narrow little valley that goes down to a creek in South Devon. And to approach the house by land, you have to go downhill quite steeply. And so the first thing you see of the house and the farm buildings is their roofs. So you've got sort of the valley that roughly is V-shaped, and then little roofs peeking up from between trees and things. And those contrasting angles were just sort of, I don't know, really nice. Like there is a lot of history at the farm. The site used to be a fishing hamlet that at some point burned down, and then the house was rebuilt in the 20s and 30s. And in one of the buildings they've got framed all of the architectural drawings and plans and everything that went into things from sort of the buildings themselves to bits of terracing for the garden to drainage systems, and it's just fascinating, and I love how proudly that history is on show. And yeah, it's a beautiful arts and crafts house, and I'm a sucker for a bit of arts and craft aesthetic. And So yeah, so the cable pattern goes all the way down and you've just got these downwards V's with little inverted V's sitting in the bottom of them. And that goes all the way down and then to the cuff. And I just really like how that sits together. And yeah, the buttons, I've talked about Tom before. The buttons are Tom Dyson woodworking. The buttons were not sourced from within the Southwest England fibre shed area. Tom is just outside, but he is more local to me than some of the yarn producers, and they are actually local wood and locally made and all completely traceable, and I love that. And they're beautiful buttons and I use them whenever I possibly can. So this tank is the final design I have to show you from the collection. This is Tree Hay. The yarn is from Gutchpool Farm. This is actually the first design I worked on in the collection and the first farm visit I did, because Gutchpool is literally just down the road, a few miles away. And I've been a couple of times since. And so we did the photo shoot for the collection at Gutchpool. And it's just really nice. They've got loads of stuff going on. And so the yarns, so the cream is Dorset Down, which is a really nice bouncy fibre. It's quite a strong off-white, like for a white wool. It's definitely cream, like if you see the colour of the yarn compared to the label, which gives it a lovely softness, like visually, and provides a lovely background for the Shetland yarn, which I used for the stranded colour work and edging. So the Shetland, they have spun to 2 different colours, as I mentioned when talking about Garlett Farm. Shetland sheep come in lots of colours, and so these ones, this one is Morit, which is like a classic warm mid-brown, and then Charcoal is a really dark, quite cool brown. It's still brown, but it's very cool, and it's got a little bit of sort of salt and pepperiness going on. And what I found really interesting is that although they're both Shetland and spun to the same spec and everything, they have a slightly different feel to them. The Morit is just got a little bit more of a character feel to it, like it's slightly more matte feeling, and then like a bit more toothy. And then the Charcoal is just super soft. It's really, really lovely. And usually with natural colours within the same breed, I tend to expect the darker colours to be slightly coarser, just because that often pans out that way. But in this case, not so. So for the design, I knew I wanted to do colour work because Rachel, who owns Gutchpool Farm and who I've chatted to a fair bit now because she's lovely, and she's also a knitwear designer. She loves stranded colour work. She does a lot of Fair Isle, and so I'm not surprised that she's created a yarn that is so perfect for colour work. Like, it's really bouncy and it's a light 4-ply weight. I haven't actually mentioned all of the other yarns are spun to the same weight. Sorry, they're all DK. 3-4 of them are spun to the same weight. So the one from Lower Hampton for the hat, the 2 from the Woven Briar for the mitts, and the 2 yarns for the cardigan, so 5 yarns. They're all spun at Rampisham Hill Mill in Dorset, and they are all 200 meters to 100 grams or 100 meters to 50 grams, depending on the put-up you get it in. And then the Rum and Raisin from Raw Wool Company is spun at the Natural Fibre Company and is woolen spun. And that one, let me just check the specs on it. That is 220 meters per 100 grams. So it is very slightly finer than the others. So that's woolen spun at the Natural Fibre Company, as is this one. So we've got 2 mills in this collection because they are the 2 main mills now in the southwest of England. So yes, so I knew I wanted to do colour work with this. And when I first went to Gutcherpool Farm, one of the big projects they were working on at that time, which is ongoing, but I think it's sort of just doing its own thing now. They were creating a wetland corridor, which is a massive channel that runs through the heart of the farm down to the river. And so the river Loddon flows through the farm, and then that downstream flows into the River Stour. And both on the farm and further downstream, those rivers flood. And so the idea of the wetland corridor is to get all of the rainfall on the farm to drain into this area. And then they've created a series of leaky dams. So they've done a lot of groundworks and digging to create areas where the water will slow down and pool, and they've used brushwood and dead branches and planted water-loving plants to create wetland habitat there, which is going to take a while to develop because such is the nature of these things, but it's a double whammy of hopefully preventing flooding on the farm and beyond, and also creating a habitat that is under threat in the UK, because there are lots of specific bird and animal species that like a wetland habitat, and wetland, if left alone, like small areas of it, tends to just kind of fill in and turn into woodland. So to preserve small areas of wetland, it kind of needs active management, because otherwise it stops being wetland and then that habitat is gone. And it's also areas of wetland that you would find on a lot of farms. It's not useful to the farmers, so often that gets filled in deliberately. And so to see new wetland being created on a farm is really encouraging and lovely. And in addition to that, I think when I went to the farm, they were just getting things ready to bring the sheep in over winter. And so in the barns, they had a lot of tree hay, which is hedge and tree prunings, which they feed to the sheep during the winter as fodder, rather than buying in sort of alfalfa and stuff, or anything like that. They create their own winter fodder on the farm by using stuff that is created anyway. And so the sheep will eat all of the leaves and the bark, and they get through a fair amount of it. And there can be, especially if there are things like willow bark. Willow bark has salicylic acid in it, which is what is used in aspirin. I'm not sure if it's directly salicylic acid that goes into the aspirin, but aspirin is derived from willow bark, and salicylic acid also comes from willow bark. And so some of those barks can have medicinal benefits for the sheep as well. And so I was just kind of struck when visiting the farm, like all of the different uses of just small branches and dead wood that might otherwise be discarded. And so that's where I took inspiration for my colourwork pattern. And I did a few iterations of different orientations of branches and things, but really wanted that idea of the branches sort of lying down on the ground. And so I was considering alternating the colours for the colourwork. And so doing sort of lighter brown, dark brown, lighter brown, dark brown. but ended up just using the morit for the trimming and the charcoal colour for the colour work. And so we've got the 2x2 rib around the edge, got a little split hem there, but the pattern also includes instructions to do it just a round hem if you prefer. And then the ribbing at the armholes, I don't know how well you can see, but it is skinnier at the underarms and just gets a bit wider over the shoulders. And the same for the neckband. If I get my collar out the way, it starts skinny down here and then gets wider around the back of the neck. And again, that shaping is optional. You can just do it so that they're the same width all the way around if you prefer slightly less fussy details. But yeah, I just wanted to do sort of a slightly modern take on a Fair Isle tank. And yeah, I'm excited to be wearing this one because so scared of getting coffee on it, but now it's an item of clothing rather than something that needs to be photographed and shown to people. It's an interesting distinction when something goes from a work project to something that's part of my wardrobe. But yes, so that is the tree hay tank, and I love this one. I find it funny that it's the one that I did first, but I'm talking about it the last. So yeah, that is it. Those are all the patterns. I've been working on this collection for so long. I came up with the idea in August last year, and it's now December, so that's a year and 3 months. 4 months? I don't know, time is... and it just sort of is a bit incredible to actually be almost done with it, because I've still got lots of work to do with working with the farms, because I want them to be able to use these as a way to promote their yarns. Because part of the thing is that all of these farms are doing such good work with the animals and their land, they don't necessarily have time or resources, especially if they're not knitters, to show what can be done with their yarn. Obviously some of them can, and some of them have things made from their yarn, or they make things themselves, but a lot of them don't. And I wanted to show how lovely yarns from smaller farms can be, and also restricted to just shades that are made by the sheep. And so there was quite a lot of work in balancing sort of the choices of colours and where I would place things, because I wanted it to be that I could wear everything at the same time, because the 100% sheep aesthetic is what I enjoy. I wanted everything to go together, to sort of coordinate but not be matchy-matchy. I wanted them to look like they worked together but weren't all... like when you get a fashion collection and things are very clearly different versions of the same thing, like we're going to repeat the same colour work pattern on different items. I didn't want that. I wanted each to show off something that had struck me about visiting the farm, and to make that connection with where the wool was produced. And so yes, I hope this has been enjoyable to you. Yeah, I hope you're going to enjoy the collection. It is available on my website in Ravelry, and I think this is going to be my last video for 2024. I'm going to take a big old break over Christmas and New Year now, because I have been really going for it for the last year. And I am excited to go into 2025 with fresh creative energy and a lack of deadlines. I'm looking forward to working on things for the fun of it and not with pressure to get things done. I'm really looking forward to that. I hope to have many yarny adventures to share with you, and I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you celebrate, I hope you have lovely holidays, and until next time, bye bye.